It began with a closed-door discussion that was never meant to leave the palace walls. Senior aides arrived quietly, official schedules shifted without explanation, and several long-standing charity executives suddenly themselves waiting for answers that never came. Then came the whisper. No one expected Prince William had personally reviewed Queen Camilla's charitable portfolio. Within hours, speculation exploded across royal circles. Something significant was unfolding behind the scenes, and its consequences would soon shake some of the monarchy's most visible public relationships. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For years, royal patronages had been treated as symbols of continuity, carefully maintained relationships that connected members of the monarchy to causes, charities, and communities across Britain. They were more than ceremonial responsibilities. They were influence, they were visibility, they were public proof of a royal's standing within the institution. That is why the rumours emerging from behind palace doors felt so extraordinary. According to royal insiders, unusual meetings had been taking place involving Prince William's private office. These were not the routine briefings that normally passed unnoticed. The timing was strange, the secrecy was even stranger. Senior charity officials were allegedly contacted and informed that reviews were underway, yet details remained tightly controlled. What made the situation even more intriguing was that members of Camilla's own patronage team reportedly found themselves excluded from some of the earliest conversations. As days passed, whispers evolved into speculation, and speculation began turning into concern. Royal correspondents who had spent years covering palace affairs noticed subtle but significant changes. Engagement schedules appeared to shift. Planned appearances seemed uncertain. Conversations among charity administrators reportedly became increasingly tense. No one publicly explained what was happening, but many sensed that a larger restructuring effort might be developing behind the scenes. The possibility alone was enough to send shockwaves through royal circles because such reviews rarely occurred without powerful figures driving them forward, and in this case, all roads appeared to lead back to Prince William. The future king had gradually taken on greater responsibility in recent years, but this felt different. This felt deliberate. Questions began surfacing about how much influence William now possessed over royal operations and whether a new vision for the monarchy was quietly being implemented. Supporters argued that modernization was inevitable. Critics wondered whether long-established arrangements were suddenly becoming vulnerable. Every unanswered question seemed to generate three more. The silence coming from official channels only deepened the mystery. Behind that silence, however, a larger story appeared to be forming, one involving power, priorities, and the future shape of the institution itself. What initially looked like a technical review of charitable responsibilities was beginning to resemble something far more consequential. Relationships built over years appeared to be entering uncertain territory. Long-standing assumptions were being challenged, and as palace observers searched for answers, many started to suspect that this was only the beginning of a much larger struggle, because what appeared to be a routine administrative review would soon reveal a far deeper struggle over influence, legacy, and the future direction of the monarchy itself. For years, these patronages represented far more than ceremonial titles. They were pillars of Queen Camilla's public image, carefully cultivated through appearances, speeches, and charitable campaigns. To supporters, they symbolized stability and dedication. To critics, they represented influence accumulated over decades. What made the situation speculative was not merely the possibility of change, but the fact that some of Camilla's most recognizable charitable connections suddenly appeared vulnerable at the very moment William's authority was rapidly expanding. The deeper royal observers looked into the situation, the more they realized that this was never simply about charities. The organizations connected to senior royals have always carried a significance that extends far beyond fundraising campaigns and public appearances. A patronage is a statement of trust. It is a declaration that a particular cause has earned a place within the royal institution itself. Over time, those connections become part of a royal's identity, woven into their public reputation and often used to measure their influence within the family. That reality made the rumors surrounding Camilla's patronages impossible to ignore. If changes were truly being considered, they would represent far more than an administrative adjustment. They would signal a shift in the balance of power. For years, Camilla had built relationships with numerous charitable organizations, gradually establishing herself as a recognizable figure across a wide range of causes. Supporters pointed to decades of involvement and commitment. They argued that her work had helped strengthen connections between the monarchy and important social initiatives. Yet as discussions surrounding the future of the crown intensified, those achievements became intertwined with a much larger conversation. The monarchy was entering a period of transition. King Charles continued carrying the weight of the institution, but public attention increasingly focused on the next generation and the direction they would ultimately choose. That growing focus placed Prince William under an intense spotlight. As heir to the throne, every decision he made seemed to carry greater significance than before. What once might have been viewed as routine involvement in palace affairs was now interpreted as evidence of an emerging leadership style. Royal commentators began discussing whether William was gradually shaping the institution according to his own priorities. Some praised the possibility of modernization. Others worried that long-standing traditions could be swept aside in the process. Either way, the conversation was no longer confined to private meetings. It had become a subject of national fascination. The question at the center of that fascination was both simple and profound. If the monarchy was preparing for the future, how would responsibilities be divided? Which patronages would remain where they were, and which might be reassigned to reflect a changing era? The uncertainty surrounding those questions created an atmosphere filled with anticipation. Every rumor seemed to carry new implications. Every unexplained development fueled further speculation. What made matters even more intriguing was the belief among many palace watchers that William's review was not motivated solely by public perception. There were whispers of deeper concerns that allegedly extended beyond charitable performance and into matters known only to a small circle of trusted advisors. As those whispers grew louder, attention gradually moved away from the patronages themselves and toward the private discussions that had reportedly sparked the review in the first place. What had initially appeared to be a debate about charitable responsibilities was beginning to reveal another layer entirely, because as observers examined the importance of these organizations, attention quickly shifted toward the private concerns that reportedly triggered William's unprecedented review. Reports began surfacing that concerns had been building for months, perhaps even longer. While no official statement pointed to a specific dispute, royal watchers noticed an unmistakable pattern. Meetings became more frequent. Internal assessments reportedly expanded. Conversations that once focused on ceremonial duties suddenly centered on efficiency, public engagement, and long-term strategy. The deeper investigators looked, the clearer one thing became. This was not a sudden decision. It may have been the culmination of a much larger plan. As speculation intensified, attention shifted away from the public headlines and toward the quiet machinery that keeps the monarchy functioning behind the scenes. According to palace observers, discussions surrounding charitable engagements had gradually evolved into something far more comprehensive. What began as routine evaluations allegedly expanded into broader reviews of how royal patronages were operating, how resources were being allocated, and whether long-established arrangements still reflected the priorities of a changing institution. The conversations were not dramatic on the surface, but their implications were enormous. For an institution built on continuity, even the smallest adjustment can carry consequences that ripple for years. Those familiar with royal operations began noticing a growing emphasis on measurable impact. Charitable associations that had once been judged largely on tradition and visibility were reportedly being examined through a different lens. Questions were allegedly being asked about engagement levels, public reach, and long-term effectiveness. Supporters of this approach argued that modern audiences expected more than symbolic involvement. They believed the monarchy needed to demonstrate relevance in a rapidly changing world. Critics, however, worried that the crown risked losing part of its historic identity if tradition became secondary to performance metrics. The debate was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. At the center of those discussions stood Prince William. Over recent years, He had gradually emerged as a figure associated with modernization, careful planning, and long-term thinking. Reports suggested that several of his advisors had been encouraging a fresh examination of royal responsibilities, arguing that future generations would judge the monarchy not simply by its heritage, but by its ability to adapt. That perspective reportedly found support among some senior officials, who believed the institution needed clearer priorities as it prepared for the decades ahead, yet every proposal for change seemed to create new tensions. The more people spoke about modernization, the more others questioned what might be sacrificed along the way. As those debates unfolded, senior officials allegedly began reviewing areas where responsibilities overlapped. Patronages, charitable campaigns, and public engagements that had developed over many years were reportedly placed under closer scrutiny. No one outside a small circle appeared to know the full scope of these evaluations, but rumors spread that recommendations were gradually being assembled. Some claimed they focused on streamlining responsibilities. Others believed they addressed broader questions about influence and future leadership. Whatever the truth, the existence of those recommendations became one of the most closely guarded subjects in royal circles. That secrecy only intensified public curiosity. The absence of clear answers created space for theories, speculation, and growing anticipation. Every unexplained schedule adjustment seemed meaningful. Every private meeting attracted attention. Royal commentators who had initially dismissed the rumors as routine administration now spoke of a possible turning point. The atmosphere surrounding the issue became charged with expectation because many suspected that a decisive moment was approaching. And when recommendations remain hidden for too long, they often acquire a power of their own. By the time whispers of these proposals reached the wider public, they had already become the center of a much larger story, one involving authority, succession, and the future shape of the monarchy itself. And when those recommendations finally reached the highest levels of royal decision-making, the atmosphere reportedly changed overnight. The moment arrived with remarkable speed. What had begun as speculation suddenly evolved into reports of decisive action. Sources claimed William had endorsed a restructuring proposal affecting several major patronages. The reaction was immediate. Charity leaders sought clarification, palace staff scrambled to understand the implications. Across royal circles, one question echoed louder than any other. Had the heir to the throne just demonstrated a level of authority that signaled a dramatic shift in the balance of power? For weeks, perhaps even months, rumors had circulated without confirmation. Many assumed the discussions would remain buried within internal reviews and confidential meetings. Instead, reports emerged suggesting that decisions had finally been made. What had once been treated as theoretical proposals were now being described as active changes. According to royal commentators, William had approved recommendations that affected several major charitable affiliations associated with Queen Camilla. The details remained unclear, but the message was unmistakable. The review phase was over. Action had begun. The response inside royal circles was swift and intense. Organizations connected to the reported changes suddenly found themselves facing uncertainty about their future relationships with the crown. Administrators sought guidance. Advisors attempted to interpret what the developments meant. Yet despite the growing demand for answers, official clarification appeared limited. That silence created a vacuum, and speculation rushed in to fill it. Every royal correspondent seemed to have a different interpretation. Some described the move as a practical restructuring designed to prepare the monarchy for the future. Others saw something far more significant, a demonstration of authority by a future king increasingly willing to leave his mark on the institution. What made the situation especially explosive was the scale of the reported changes. According to widespread speculation, 3 major patronages had either been reassigned, removed, or placed under review. While no single adjustment would normally trigger widespread attention, the combined effect created a powerful impression. Suddenly, conversations were no longer focused solely on charities. They centered on influence, on standing, on the invisible hierarchy that exists behind royal titles and public appearances. For many observers, the developments seemed to answer a question that had lingered quietly for years. How much power did William truly possess within the institution? The emerging reports suggested the answer might be considerably more than many had assumed. Behind palace walls, the atmosphere was said to be tense. Internal teams reportedly received information through established channels, but even those updates appeared to generate new questions rather than clear resolutions. Some staff members allegedly viewed the changes as evidence of long-term strategic planning finally being implemented. Others reportedly worried about the message being sent to organizations that had spent years building relationships with senior royals. Regardless of perspective, few doubted the significance of the moment. The future of the monarchy seemed to be moving from discussion to execution. Meanwhile, public fascination intensified. Media outlets examined every development, every rumor, and every possible implication. Commentators debated William's leadership style, describing him alternately as decisive, strategic, cautious, or transformative. Supporters praised what they viewed as strong leadership during a period of uncertainty. Critics questioned whether tradition was being sacrificed in pursuit of modernization. The debate quickly expanded beyond patronages themselves and became part of a larger conversation about the monarchy's future direction. Yet beneath all the analysis and speculation lay another reality, one far more personal than organizational charts or charitable affiliations. Because while headlines focused on structural changes and institutional strategy, palace insiders increasingly hinted that the emotional impact on those closest to the story was becoming impossible to ignore. Yet the administrative changes themselves were only part of the story, because the personal consequences were said to be far more dramatic. Few developments within royal life carry greater symbolic weight than the loss of influence. According to palace commentators, the reported removal of 3 major patronages was interpreted by many as more than a routine adjustment. It was viewed as a public signal. Supporters of Camilla argued that her years of service deserved greater recognition. Others believed the changes reflected an unavoidable transition toward a new generation. Whatever the truth, the emotional and political impact was impossible to ignore. As news of the reported changes spread through royal circles, the conversation quickly moved beyond administration and into far more sensitive territory. Patronages may appear ceremonial to the public, but within the monarchy, they often carry a deeper significance. They represent trust, relevance, and continued visibility within an institution where symbolism can be just as powerful as authority itself. That is why the reaction was so intense. For many of Camilla's supporters, the developments felt less like organizational restructuring and more like a painful reduction of influence at a moment when the future direction of the monarchy was already under intense scrutiny. Those who had followed Camilla's journey for years pointed to the effort she had invested in building her public role. They argued that her charitable work had become an important part of her identity and that any reduction in responsibilities risked overshadowing those contributions. Some reportedly viewed the changes as unfair, believing that experience and service should be rewarded rather than diminished. Their frustration was fueled by the perception that a chapter of royal life was being quietly brought to a close. Whether that perception reflected reality or not, it carried considerable emotional weight. At the same time, another narrative was gaining momentum. To many observers, the reported changes appeared to symbolize something much larger than the future of a few charitable organizations. They seemed to represent the steady arrival of a new era. Public discussion increasingly focused on generational transition, with William and Catherine becoming central figures in conversations about the monarchy's future. The debate was no longer simply about who held particular patronages. It was about who would define the institution in the years ahead. That shift in focus created new questions. If responsibilities were being reassessed today, what might happen tomorrow? If William was willing to endorse changes affecting long-established arrangements, how far might his vision ultimately extend? These questions fascinated commentators because they touched on the central uncertainty surrounding every period of royal transition. Change can be gradual for years and then suddenly feel immediate. Many believed they were witnessing exactly such a moment. Media coverage only intensified those perceptions. Headlines and commentary increasingly framed the reported decisions as evidence of a broader shift in power. Some analysts argued that William was demonstrating decisive leadership during a period of institutional evolution. Others suggested that the symbolism of the move mattered more than its practical consequences. Was this a strategic effort to modernize royal operations, or was it intended to send a message about future priorities? The fact that no clear answer emerged only deepened public interest. As the debate continued, attention also turned toward Catherine. Observers began examining the role she might play in shaping future charitable initiatives and public engagement strategies alongside William. Their growing prominence reinforced the impression that a transition was already underway, even if no formal announcement had been made. The more people discussed the reported patronage changes, the more they seemed to become a symbol of a monarchy standing at a crossroads. Yet symbols often create consequences far beyond their original intent. What started as a conversation about charitable responsibilities had evolved into a national debate about leadership, succession, and the institution's future direction. And as reactions intensified across Britain and beyond, the monarchy faced a larger challenge, explaining what this moment meant for the future. Behind every major royal decision lies a network of competing perspectives. Some believed William was protecting the institution by adapting it to modern expectations. Others feared that rapid changes risked alienating established supporters. The reported patronage shake-up quickly became a symbol of a broader divide inside royal circles. It was no longer merely about charities. It had become a debate over tradition versus transformation, and neither side appeared willing to surrender its position quietly. As public discussion intensified, it became increasingly clear that the controversy had evolved far beyond the original reports. The conversation was no longer centered on which organizations were affected or how responsibilities might be redistributed. Instead, it had become a reflection of a much deeper question confronting the monarchy itself. What kind of institution should it be in the years ahead? That question had lingered beneath the surface for decades, but now it was being brought into the open by a decision that many viewed as symbolic of a larger struggle taking place behind palace walls. On one side stood those who believed the monarchy's strength came from continuity. To them, tradition was not an obstacle to progress, but the very foundation upon which public trust had been built. They argued that gradual evolution had always served the institution well, and warned against changes that might appear too abrupt. Supporters of this view saw the reported patronage restructuring as potentially disruptive. They worried that long-standing relationships, built over years of dedication and service, could be weakened in pursuit of a future that remained uncertain. On the other side were those who viewed adaptation as essential. They argued that every institution faces moments when maintaining relevance requires difficult choices. According to this perspective, streamlining responsibilities and reassessing priorities were not signs of instability but evidence of strategic thinking. William's supporters often pointed to the changing expectations of the public, insisting that future generations would demand greater clarity, accountability, and measurable impact from public figures. To them, the reported changes reflected preparation rather than disruption. The clash between these viewpoints transformed what might have been a brief, administrative story into a defining debate about succession-era leadership. Every decision associated with William suddenly attracted greater scrutiny. Every action was examined, not only for its immediate consequences, but also for what it revealed about the kind of monarch he might eventually become. Some commentators praised his willingness to confront difficult issues. Others questioned whether such moves risked creating unnecessary divisions during an already sensitive period for the royal family. The debate soon expanded beyond Britain. International media outlets began analysing the developments through their own lenses, often portraying the reported patronage changes as evidence of broader transformation within the monarchy. Stories about charities gradually gave way to stories about power, influence, and generational change. The fascination was understandable. Across the world, people were witnessing what appeared to be the gradual emergence of a new leadership dynamic, one that carried implications far beyond the organizations directly involved. As attention grew, so did speculation. If major patronages could be reassessed today, what other responsibilities might be reconsidered tomorrow? If the institution was truly entering a period of modernization, where would that process end? These questions fueled endless discussion among royal observers, each theory adding another layer to an already complex narrative. Yet despite the competing interpretations, one fact remained undeniable. The story had become larger than any individual decision, because beneath the arguments over strategy, tradition, and leadership, something even more significant was taking shape. The reported patronage shake-up had exposed tensions that had long existed beneath the surface, and those tensions were beginning to reveal deeper truths about the monarchy's future direction. But while commentators argued about motives and consequences, the deeper significance of the episode was only beginning to emerge. The reported decision carried a message that extended far beyond three organizations. It suggested that the monarchy's next chapter may already be taking form. William's approach appeared increasingly focused on structure, accountability, and long-term relevance. Whether praised or criticized, the move reinforced a growing perception that the future king was no longer waiting for the future to arrive. He was actively shaping it in real time, and that realization changed everything. As the controversy surrounding the patronages continued to dominate royal discussions, a broader picture began to emerge. What many initially dismissed as an isolated administrative adjustment increasingly appeared to be part of a larger vision for the future. William was no longer being viewed simply as the heir waiting patiently in the wings. In the eyes of many observers, he had become a central decision-maker whose influence could already be felt across key areas of royal life. Every move was examined, every decision carried weight, and every development seemed to reinforce the belief that preparations for the monarchy's next era were already underway. Supporters argued that this approach reflected a commitment to efficiency, public trust, and long-term stability. They believed that the institution could not afford to rely solely on tradition in a rapidly changing world. Instead, they saw a future king attempting to balance respect for history with the demands of modern leadership. Critics remained cautious, questioning whether such changes risked unsettling the delicate relationships that had long helped maintain unity within the royal family. Yet even they acknowledged one undeniable reality. William's role was evolving, and that evolution was becoming increasingly visible. Alongside William's growing prominence came renewed attention on Catherine. Many commentators viewed the couple as the embodiment of the monarchy's future, with every decision interpreted through the lens of what their eventual reign might look like. As discussions about charitable responsibilities, public engagement, and institutional priorities continued, Catherine's influence became part of the conversation as well. Together, they appeared to represent a new phase for the monarchy, one focused on strategic planning, careful stewardship, and long-term relevance. In royal history, the most consequential battles are rarely fought in public. They unfold through decisions, responsibilities, and symbols of authority that reshape institutions over time. The reported removal of three major patronages may ultimately be remembered as one of those moments, not because of the organizations involved, but because of what it appeared to reveal. A monarchy preparing for transition, a future king asserting influence, and a royal family entering a new and uncertain chapter. As the debate gradually settled, attention shifted toward the legacy these events might leave behind. Questions remained about Camilla's future influence and the role she would continue to play within the institution. At the same time, public fascination with succession-era leadership showed no signs of fading. People were no longer discussing only individual patronages. They were discussing duty, authority, and the survival of a centuries-old institution navigating a period of profound change. The reported decisions had become symbols of something much larger, a reflection of how the monarchy adapts, endures, and prepares for the future. Perhaps that is why this story resonated so deeply. Beneath the headlines and speculation lay a timeless struggle between continuity and change, between legacy and renewal. And while opinions remained divided, few doubted that the events surrounding these patronages would be remembered as part of a larger transition. Because in the House of Windsor, every decision leaves a mark, and this one may be remembered as the moment the future quietly stepped forward and claimed its place. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.